Are you ready to give us your updates so we can start with the questions after that?
Okay, well, a lot has happened this past week. We got the final approvals through the International Court of Justice. I should explain to people that in addition to the ICJ that they think of in terms of the maritime and admiralty and corporate issues that these uh, quote unquote governments that have been um, redefined as corporations typically use, there's also a sovereign international court of justice, and that's where the issues pertaining to people uh, are lodged. And so, when we're talking about these decisions coming down from the International Court of Justice, uh, don't assume that it's one or the other until you really look at what the subject matter is, because the jurisdiction of the court depends upon the subject matter. And so if you've got subject matter pertaining to living people, it's addressed under a different form of law and by a different court, even though it may have a similar name, um, versus an issue that has to do with a lawful person, such as the original American government is a lawful person, and that's under a different form of international law. So you see, uh, when I say ICJ, don't think that it's necessarily one way or the other. Look at the subject matter, and that will tell you which form of international court of justice we're talking about. This past week, there's been a big flurry of people all upset and thinking that, oh, we're going to get in trouble, and Anna doesn't know what she's doing in commerce, and blah 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 blah. And look, she has a district court case against what appears to be my name, but isn't. Okay, I've taught you all enough so you know that isn't my name, and you should be confident in that fact. I have never used the name Anna M. Reisinger. Von Reitz with a capital V on the Von. This person does not actually exist. Of course, all of these legal fiction entities don't exist. And so actually what they're doing is a case of willful aggravated identity theft that is compounded by dereliction of duty on the part of the administrators responsible for the British territorial side of things. Because of course, they're not actually operating as civilians, they're operating as part of a civilian military, because the only role that they have here is one as a regulatory or military role. So those guys get charged with additional crimes and dereliction of duty and things like that. Anyway, all of these things that you've seen them do to me, believe me, they have done to me and to others for many years, and they've gotten away with it. That is shortly going to come to a screeching halt, and their courts are going to be shut down. They should have been shut down shortly after the Civil War. In fact, they should never have begun after the Civil War. However, just because they had a position of trust that they abused and they were able to act under color of law, they got away with it. Those days are done, and they will shortly no longer be in business in the United States. So just hold on to your hats here for a little bit longer, and you will live to see the day where the law of commerce and the tax laws and all those other nice things get turned around and are used to completely deconstruct the district court system in this country, the way it's been run anyway. The only place that the district court should be operating is in the District of Columbia. They really have no business to be in the states of the Union, and they certainly have no business misaddressing Americans as if they were British subjects, or even worse, trying to misrepresent them a second time as citizens of the Holy Roman Empire's municipal government. So all of that stuff is getting taken care of, and it's not going to be just me, it's going to be everybody. Everyone who's had homes stolen on false basis, everyone who's been foreclosed upon, evicted, suffered armed trespass by their employees and other despicable acts will be in a position to gain restitution. And those who have participated in these ways will be re-educated. And those who are really truly worthy of punishment will get their comeuppance, both in terms of jail time, fines, and many of them will be forced to make a career change. But that's okay. We don't want these people serving in positions of trust. We don't want them to be looked up to in the community. We do not want them to continue to be in a position where they can criminally abuse other people at all from any position of authority. And so it's a good thing that they're being kicked out and fired, not eligible for rehire or election. So I hope that makes everybody feel better. Their days of being able to come after anyone are extremely limited now. And it's coming push to shove. Now, you're seeing a great deal of many confusing things go on. And it's hard to keep track of it and who's who and what's what. Well, you've got this giant corporation called the United States Incorporated, and it went bankrupt in 2015, and it's been in a process of bankruptcy settlement ever since. And we're now in the final throes of that bankruptcy settlement. You've seen DOJ going through all of these different agency and departmental records and doing fiscal audits on all these different entities, and that has to be done in order to settle the bankruptcy. You're also seeing a lot of disruption and a lot of various settlement type things come up at the state level. And that too is part of the bankruptcy because you have state franchises of the federal parent corporations that are operating. And they too are getting audited, and all of their books are getting looked at, and they're being charged a portion of the bankruptcy, and they're being renamed and rebranded. Suddenly you're seeing new forms of names. You're seeing new different organizations stepping in. Here in Alaska, the only county that has ever existed has been, at our level, it's been the American County, and now suddenly they've got a county incorporated, okay? So all this stuff is going on in the background as these large corporations that have been in the business of providing governmental services try to rebrand themselves and kind of skip over the bumps of the bankruptcy and get back into business or continue in business while all of this is going on. Meanwhile, the other big federal corporation, which we'll, for simplicity, just call the USA Inc., under Donald Trump, is trying to ride through all of this too, and they are close to being bankrupt. In fact, they could very easily be bankrupted this week. So far, they've been able to borrow enough money from Israel and other supporters to be able to keep solvent, but they're very close to bankruptcy too and are minding their pennies as a result. And they do not want to pick up any of the social costs or other, they don't want to pick up the extra federal employees or the federal agencies that are kind of left over from the bankrupt United States Inc. So you're seeing all these sort of internecine back and forths going on. And a lot of people don't understand that there are two of everything. There's a municipal Department of Defense that we call the DOD, and there's a British Territorial Department of Defense that we spell out, Department of Defense, upper lowercase, incorporated, right? It's the same way throughout the entire structure. There is a municipal Department of Labor that we call the DOL, okay? And then we have the British Territorial version, which is spelled out Department of Labor, upper lowercase. And in no case does anybody tell you that these are freestanding corporations in and of themselves. So whenever you see the three-letter agencies or the four-letter agencies, BATF, IRS, DOL, .puff, all this sort of stuff, that's municipal government. That's the all capital letters name association. Those are all municipal corporations And so they're one side. They're the federal civil service side of the government that you're used to. And then on the other side, you see all these upper lowercase entities, everything from, the state of Texas, upper lowercase, right? That's a state franchise of the USA Inc., right? The British Territorial British Crown Corporation, calling itself the United States of America Incorporated. They just kind of omit that very important telltale word. And so you've got two of everything. And so, of course, you have two military forces, two bands of mercenaries. You've got two departments of every kind you can think of. And plus, you have all sorts of agencies which may or may not be in common. For the most part, you have two of everything. But there are some additional agencies that do work for the municipal government that don't do work for the British territorial government, and vice versa, simply because they have different needs and different vendors, different functions that they each individually have. So when you see this stuff like that came out this week, treasonous generals against Trump, well, let's get a clue here, folks. These are these quote unquote generals on both sides. Either way, if it's the British Territorial Corporation and it's a commercial corporation, or it's a Holy Roman Empire successor that is running a municipal corporation, they're private corporations. They're private foreign corporations, okay? So in what sense are they committing treason if they are not obeying the rules and dictates of the president of a different company? See, the whole thing goes out the window. It's all wonky. It's all strange. It's not what it appears to be, and it's not the way it should be. It's not actually a government. It's a governmental services corporation, either commercial or municipal, in the business of providing essential government services. And if you look at Amendment 4 in any of the constitutions, you'll see a long list of different services and different things that they're precluded from doing. And it's pretty obvious if you look at the structure of the constitutional end of the government that was based on constitution contracts, which are all service contracts, by the way. If you look at it, you'll see that there are 3 service contracts that are called constitutions. They're all quote unquote federal constitutions, although the name federal constitution once meant the Constitution issued in 1787, as opposed to the one entered in 1789 or the one entered in 1790. Anyway, you've got 3 federal constitutions, and each one of those subcontractors that were created and that were supposed to work under that particular service contract are working in a different sector of the law. So the American subcontractor, the federal subcontractor acting under the Constitution for the United States of America, inherited delegated land jurisdiction responsibilities. The British territorial subcontractor acting under the Constitution of the United States of America had delegated sea jurisdiction duties, and the Holy Roman Empire subcontractor, that was the municipal government, had duties in the jurisdiction of the air. So as I'm standing here and talking about this to you, I'm sure that there are those among you who are very confused and thinking, well, what does duties in the land jurisdiction mean, or duties in the sea jurisdiction versus duties in the air jurisdiction? Well, these are all international jurisdictions, okay? First and foremost, none of them have anything to do with our nation and our nation states, okay? The federal constitutional service provider, the American federal constitution provider, took care of things like the U.S. Mint and oversaw our tariff offices and our customs to a certain extent. they took care of the mail on the land mass of our country. They were the ones that were available for declaring different kinds of peace treaties and different kinds of accords with other countries that were, that was part of their duty. And the British territorial government had sea jurisdiction duties, and that's where they got into crafting elements of our trade policy and acting as our trustees on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. And so they had duties that had to do with the sea, and the Holy Roman Municipal Government had overall oversight for the postal service that linked both land and sea transport of mail, different kinds of international customs and duties and tariffs and stamp acts and all those sorts of things, patents, weights and measures, trademarks, copyrights, all that stuff is jurisdiction of the air. All the things that we think of as intellectual property rights, that's all jurisdiction of the air. And so is labor, because labor is a matter of energy. And so things like labor contracts, performance contracts, those sorts of things that affect, say, musical performances, actors, all of that is jurisdiction of the air too. So anyway, just think of it as rather neatly organized, but our intended government was torn apart in the wake of the Civil War. And if you think about it in terms of having a 6-cylinder engine, we've been functioning on 4 cylinders ever since. And once you understand that, you can better understand why our government has failed to work properly. I mean, there have been so many missing elements to it, and there's been so much usurpation against the interests of the American people and this country as a whole, because basically subcontractors that were never granted any authority on purpose because it was a conflict of interest or against the best interest of this country, they nonetheless got in there, they usurped upon the situation and began doing things that they never actually had any authority to do. And that divide became even more obvious when they started trying to take over duties that are properly the part of the American government, which is separate from the federal government. I am constantly amazed that people do not know this little flying factoid, but we have 2 capitals in this continent here, this part of the North American continent. We have our national capital at Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we have our federal capital at Washington, D.C., in District of Columbia. And we even have an entire district that's set aside to do nothing but their staging area and their business. So people need to take that into their consciousness that, hey, we have 2 capitals. And why do we have 2 capitals? Well, because we have one capital where the unvarnished actual government of the American people is seated, and that's Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we have a federal capital where our subcontractors who are working under delegated powers and who are exercising delegated powers have their capital to do their business, to conduct what their responsibilities are. So when I tell you that we're going to be restoring our national capital, our national seat of government, I'm not talking about moving the federal capital from Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia. I'm talking about cleaning, building up, dusting off, and bringing Philadelphia back to our view as the center of the national capital for the American government versus the United States government, which operates under our delegated powers. Okay? So this is an exciting time. There's a lot of good things going on. Things are getting straightened out. Roles are getting enforced. Contracts are getting enforced. The constitutions are getting enforced. A much greater understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the different parties has come to the fore. Uh, Another thing that we really need to understand is that our role as the American government, both at the state level and at the federation and ultimately the confederation levels, is to tell our employees what we want done. And that goes for the states too. The state assemblies are supposed to be telling the state legislatures what we want done and how we want it done. And then it's up to the state legislature to go pick around through the beans and figure out how they're going to uh, pay for and deploy employees to get the work done. So if you really want to think about this, it's like we're the homeowners and we have hired a subcontractor to do the maintenance. And we have to tell them what maintenance we want done and how we want to do it and how much we want to spend on it and give them directions. But then in the accomplishment of the actual tasks, then they have to manage the employees to get the work done. So you've got a general contractor, you've got a subcontractor, and that subcontractor may also have vendors, but they are all working together on one project and they all have their unique role. And our role is to tell our employees what we want done and how we want it done. We haven't been doing that for 160 years. They've been running the shop. And the employees have been left in charge of the business. They've been left in charge of all of the decisions about how our country is run, what we spend money on. All of this they've usurped from us, the actual employers. And to add insult to injury, they have misrepresented us as if we were subordinates of theirs, as if we were US citizens, and as if we were subject to their law and to their instruction instead of it being the other way around. They've got everything turned upside down 180. And so it's up to us to raise our hand and say, no, sorry, no, I'm not one of you. I'm not a US citizen of any kind. I'm an American. I'm an American national. I might serve my state as a state citizen, but in no case am I an employee. I'm not a federal employee. I'm not a federal dependent. I'm not seeking any political asylum from the District of Columbia. Thank you very much. Here's what your actual contract is. Please obey it and observe it. Okay, that's our role. And it's the same way with the states. When it comes to directing the state to do something, we have the absolute right as the state assembly to draw up a list of priorities and concerns and tell the state legislature, okay, here are your marching orders. This is what we want done. And then it's up to them to figure out how they're going to approach getting the work done. Just as you might turn to a plumber and say, okay, well, we need a new boiler in this particular building, and then we want to see the cost estimates and your plan for doing this. Okay, it's totally legitimate. We're the employers. We get to do that. We get to tell the state legislature what we want done, and we can also direct to an extent how much we want to pay for it. We can set kind of an eyeball guesstimate for how much we want to pay toward the new boiler, right? Just like when you're working with a contractor to do anything else. And this is where we've been missing the boat for a long time. And they've been getting away with it because they kept the foundational situation secret. They didn't tell us what went on after the Civil War. And they just kind of snuck in the back door and got themselves into a cozy little cuckoo bird's position, usurping against their employers. So it's really pretty simple when you get it all just shook down to what it is. And now we've got a bunch of employees 160 years down the track who are, number one, very confused because they think this is the way it's been done. That's the way it's always been done. Well, no, it's not the way it's always been done, but it's been done this way wrongly for a very long time. And so our job here is to correct the operations of the government so that the horse is again in front of the cart, and so that the employers are telling the employees what they want done, and so that there is a clearly identified American government separate from the United States government in everybody's mind, And we know what these words mean. You know, as I've often said, when I was a kid, and we were growing up, we had two courses. One was American history, that you studied American history in 7th grade, and then you had United States history in 8th grade. And they were two completely separate subjects with different textbooks. So imagine my amazement when, 35, 40 years later, my grandson comes home and he thinks that all there is United States history. Never heard of American history. Oh, what's that? Well, it turns out that in 1976, Jimmy Carter came along and created something called the Federal Department of Education, which, by the way, is anti-constitutional. And they used federal block grants and various other means of kind of bribes and payola and slime bag politics to create what are called school districts that shouldn't exist either, right? And they switched the identity of the public, as in public school districts. We Americans think, well, of course, those are our schools and our kids, and it's our money in support of them. It's our credit being extended to them. So, of course, they're American schools. No, as part of the overall usurpation of the American government, they had been converted into what? School districts. Anytime that you hear that word district, municipal district, assembly district, school district, district attorney, what are they talking about? They're talking about District of Columbia. They're talking about federal citizenries as the public being served. Okay? So this is totally backwards and has been for a long time. And people have just been drifting along in ignorance and thinking, well, it's okay. It has to be all right. It's our government. But it isn't our government. It's our subcontractors acting as a government, and they're foreign subcontractors. So I got a whole bunch of people angry at me yesterday because I pointed out that Mr. Trump has lost his brains. I mean, he's totally lost his mind. The guy has signed an executive order, which, by the way, he was told by the Supreme Court, executive orders do not apply to the general public, and that he can't just sign an executive order and rewrite public law as if we were all on board a ship and he was our captain. So he's already been set down about the public side of executive order obligations. But then he signs an executive order arbitrarily setting the price of gold at $20,000 an ounce. Well, anyone who thinks that you can set the price of gold by issuing an executive order is a few bricks short of a load, okay? It's just not going to work that way. Now, he can have his citizenry, he can have his British territorial Tories wandering around in a daze thinking that every ounce of gold they've got is worth $20,000, but they'll just simply be delusional and everybody else will be laughing at them. So, this is entering the realm of the crazy, really crazy. And the other aspect of this is that all of this is just predicated on trying to defend an indispensable and insupportable, and by indispensable, I don't mean that it's something that you can't get along without. I mean, it's something you can't dispense. He cannot possibly enforce that $20,000 an ounce price for gold, no matter how much he wants to help his buddies at the Federal Reserve. As we have pointed out, and right now the link to a properly formatted and functioning link to that 18-minute, I said 17-minute, but that was an earlier version, the 18-minute Dutch grandma explanation of why we have an immense amount of prepaid credit and why we don't have a national debt, never did, and why we should never have paid any interest on said non-existent national debt. Now Mr. Trump is proposing to increase the price of gold in order to eradicate the national debt, which doesn't exist. Now, this might be something that, we could excuse, except that back in 2015, I began corresponding with Donald Trump and with his administration and saying, what in the heck are you people talking about? We don't have a national debt in this country. And, they know. Here's the problem. I just went through it again for you all via this video, exactly why we do not have a national debt and why we never did have any appreciable national debt and why we should not have been bamboozled with all this talk about a national debt. This was just a setup. This was just a con job to make us think that we had this huge, insurmountable national debt, and it's all just bull. Just a racket, just a sting, okay? And now it's obvious to anybody who sits down and thinks about it for 5 minutes. You can observe it directly, just exactly what happens when you spend a Federal Reserve note, an IOU, into the economy. So it cannot stand. It absolutely cannot stand. No rational being looking at what they've done can conclude that there is any national debt whatsoever. Nobody can conclude that we ever had any appreciable, huge national debt to pay interest on. And nobody can conclude that we presently have anything but a humongous national credit, not debt, credit. And just because they killed the ledger is what it's called. They killed the ledger. They separated the positives from the negatives, and they focused all the attention on the negatives. That's what they did. And they never balanced the books. They never they never made any effort to bring the books back into balance. And so it's just a simple, ugly, stupid con game, and they've been caught. And now they're all scrambling and going, as if this were news, as if people couldn't observe this directly, as if we're all so damn stupid that we just didn't know that we were being bilked by their legal tender laws and bilked by their pretensions of good faith and credit of Congress. It's all just a bunch of hooey, okay? And you can see it. So if you haven't watched that 18-minute kind of Dutch grandma video that I made, and I used my little hand puppets and demonstrated how the debt note circulates repeatedly and yet never gets discharged, never gets taken out of the economy, and therefore it accumulates. And that's the basis of the quote unquote national debt scam, because in fact, each and every one of those debt notes is paid with actual goods and services, and it continues to circulate. So every time that it's presented, it extracts more goods and services and more goods and services and more goods and services. And in fact, nothing is ever paid on their side of the transaction. It's completely inequitable, and it's never been satisfied. The debt has never been satisfied. Instead, they've made a practice of going bankrupt and claiming that we're their underwriters and throwing their debts back on us. And they've been allowed to get away with this. Why? Because the people that were supposedly representing us were in on it and benefiting from it. They were in conflict of interest. They were in breach of trust. And they were in breach of their service contracts. And they were just bilking and pillaging and plundering us, as they're continuing to do, to the extent that we let them get away with it. But now we have the world community on our side of this issue. And anyone that claims to be our employees will have to be working for us from now on, instead of working for the Queen or the King or the popes. They're going to have to abide by their service contracts, or they're going to have to be removed from this country for violating the Residence Act. Because actually, all of these federal employees that are working for these foreign for-profit private corporations, whether commercial or municipal, are only here. They're only allowed to be in this country by the Residence Act, which provides for them to remain here and to retain their business interests and have homes and live here among us under certain conditions. So they violated the conditions. And they either bring their operations into compliance with their service contracts and get back in their box and start saying, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, or they're out of here. and we have plenty of allies that will make sure that they get escorted out. So when I say that things have come push to shove, they have. And the only one who seems to be having trouble understanding is Donald Trump. And it's not for lack of us talking. You've all seen the correspondences that have been sent to Donald Trump. And nobody can say that we have not offered to explain or offered to help him in, administering the contract properly or anything. We've been willing to work with him, willing to help. It's not our fault. It's not anything that we have done or failed to do that has resulted in Donald Trump being off in left field, not knowing what's going on and rampaging around doing silly things like trying to set the price of gold via an executive order. If he won't talk to us, then we can't explain things to him. If he won't work with us, then he's going to wander off and do things that are outside the boundaries of his role in his contract. And that is extremely concerning. But, whether we like it or not, the USA LLC that they're now working under, and which has been funded by half a dozen billionaires that have been benefiting themselves with public contracts like Palantir, that's all conflict of interest stuff, where they've invested money in USA LLC, this new company that they've spun off in London this past year. Elon Musk, all these guys, Larry Fink from BlackRock, they've got all these huge contracts, huge government contracts coming back out at them in exchange for their billions of dollars that have been invested in, the USA LLC. They think that we can't see this, but of course we do, because now we finally realize that we're dealing with a bunch of commercial and municipal corporations, and that they're just for-profit corporations like any other corporations. They're like, if you wanted to look at it, the USA Inc. British Crown commercial corporations are really no different than, say, Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas or IBM or Exxon. I mean, they're all of the same ilk. They're all commercial companies. And the municipal companies are really no different than any of the other kinds of municipal corporations that have been registered with the Pope's organizations under the Roman Curia all these years. Now, one of the interesting things that happened with us with the International Court of Justice is that the justices kind of woke up and went, "Oh my, the horses are talking." They're acting in a sovereign capacity. They're actually operating as people again. We haven't seen this since before the Second World War. The people that are there now have never seen action in the sovereign capacity. So I'm not joking to you when I tell you that when we first started coming forward like this, they looked at us like we were Mr. Ed. They thought it was just, everybody's head snapped around, this complete look of shock and disbelief on their faces. Oh my, it's a talking horse. So the same sort of thing went on with the court system, but they finally jangled awake and realized that, oh, yeah, right. We remember land jurisdiction. Yeah, lawful persons versus legal persons, And so we finally got them to recognize the fact that there are beings that have standing with respect to the actual physical assets and the actual physical countries and states, okay? And we came forward into the court system with standing, and of course, our standing, being material and substantive, outweighs and is superior to the sort of airy-fairy, paper-bound world of the corporations. this should be so obvious. It should be so simple, but it required an entire education effort that took 20 years to get everybody back on the same page and being cognizant of the rules and traditions and the pecking order and everything else. So, I'm going over this and making it sound like, well, of course, but it was not that way. It was a long, hard struggle between the dissolution of the League of Nations and the rise of the United Nations. We had two different jurisdictions and many changes in law forms and legal and lawful presumptions. And so complete and total different system between one and the other. And so by the time we came back around, all of this had to be brought up again. People had to relearn the law of the land. We always called the constitutions the law of the land. Well, all of that had to be relearned, literally, because enough time had passed between when the territorial government snuck back in through the back door and started operating under color of law, and when the land jurisdiction constitutional governments were functioning. People had forgotten that there was ever anything else. And a few of us remembered. That's what I can tell you about that, is that a few of us remembered. A few of us were lucky enough, one way or another, to either have been taught that as young children, or to have been taught that in the course of our lives. And as a result, the rats weren't able to get away with it. So thank God for your elders. And please be aware that your elders, literally, I've told you this before, most of the people that staff the Federation are elderly. I'm one of the younger sprouts. We don't have anybody who's younger than 45. So the Federation is a bunch of middle-aged and elders. And so
I'm still young.
yeah, you're the baby in the crew. But no, really, the people that have led this and done this are quite elderly. And many of them have health problems, and many of them live on a limited, they're on pensions, they're retirees on fixed incomes. And yet they've managed to kind of bootstrap this along to the point where we actually started organizing the state assemblies. So be aware. This is not this has not been a young person's game, and it has not been a rich man's game. It's all been grassroots from the start, and it still is. Now, they've done certain things to try to hurt me and try to slow me down. And I have been targeted, and I am a political prisoner. It's not the first time, okay? They have certain tricks that they always pull, and they think that they're basically just thugs that are putting a gloss on it and trying to make it look like that what they're doing is legal or lawful or whatever, but it isn't. Okay, so they're just absolutely arbitrarily causing trouble for me. Okay, well, it's not my fault that they're doing the wrong thing. It's not my fault that they're operating in breach of trust. It's not my fault that they're operating under color of law. It's not my fault that they've been dereliction of duty for 160 years. It's not my fault that they've been operating as basically a privateer organization this entire time. But, it is what it is. We have thugs in charge. We have well-honed criminal agencies. We've got criminals infiltrated throughout our government, on both the state of state government and the federal government itself. So yeah, it's not easy, all right? And we just need to find ways of working around that for a little bit longer until we can bring to bear our own court actions and get our own courts back up fully operational, and take some of the other steps that we need to take, get our banks functioning, which is that's the other update. We have solved our liquidity problems, and we have gotten our vendor interfaces working, and we've got the instant update, the automated exchange system that automatically calculates the exchange rates between the American Federation dollar, the United States silver dollar, and the prepaid Harmony dollars. We've got all of that sorted out. So now it's a matter of just the final touches and numbers going into place. And so I'm very happy about that, and I'm looking forward to it, because then I will not have to deal with a bank system that has targeted me as an individual for political reasons. And this is just a prelude of the kind of crap that we would have to go through if we went along with their plan and let them control the banking of every individual American, and could cut you off if they didn't like your political stance. Oh, if you said something wrong about, if you criticized Netanyahu, you could be starving to death because you wouldn't have access to bank services. This cannot be allowed to stand. None of that can. And we can't let them go to a cashless digital system either, because not only would that lead to, political targeting, it would also lead to a situation where funds could be just arbitrarily erased. All sorts of mischief could go on. We have to have cash. People have to have something that they can hold in their hand and say. And so all of that has to be arranged at the cash end of it does. We'll be operating a digital system, or rather a certificated digital system, just simply because of the time constraints and everything. But no, we are continuing on to be able to print cash bills so that you will have coinage and cash in your possession, and will not be dependent upon a government-sponsored digital system that they can, manipulate however they wish. It's not going to be that way. So there will be no monopoly, and there will be no arbitrary power over your ability to buy and sell. That is something that cannot be allowed to progress. Now, I'm very happy that we've managed to get gold, silver, and the prepaid credit established. I'm happy that they are now presently striking the new coinage. The silver dollars will go into the economy, and those silver dollars, each one of them, will reduce the amount of pressure on the national debt, as well as serving as a form of a medium of exchange, either directly, silver for apples, or indirectly, silver for a fiat currency exchange. But anyway, it's good news that you get both silver and gold. Hunter is putting out a last call. Anybody that wants to put Federal Reserve notes into the vault is kind of being given a last call here, saying, if you're going to do it now, because it's closing. And so if you have a few Federal Reserve notes that you would like to exchange for American Federation dollars that become available into our vendor system, and then almost very soon thereafter into the general vendor system, do that now, because once everything opens up, then that preferential exchange rate also goes away, and we resume business with the day-to-day exchange rate that everybody else has. So if you want to take advantage of that 1934, 1933 one-to-one exchange rate of silver for Federal Reserve notes, this is the time to do it. I'd do it myself if I had any extra money, but my money gets thrown into the pot to try to keep all this rolling. And so, but good on you if you have a few extra shekels that you can put in the vault and save for a rainy day, because that rainy day is most likely coming so far as the operations of the current corporate-driven government is concerned. All right, questions?
Roger that. Okay, let's start off with this one. Now that the American government is officially back in session in this country, do we make it official to fly our American civil flag and retire Old Glory where all flags are flown?
What a good idea. Tell you the truth, I hadn't thought about it. That is one of the more knotty problems that has been with us throughout, is that the British did not declare peace on the sea, and neither did the Holy Roman Empire subcontractors declare peace in the air jurisdiction. And that's why they've been flying the war flag all this time. But that brings forward the question of why, if our country is at peace, are our delegated authorities being practiced at war? And that's a very good point. They should have to fly the peace flag, because if the land and soil are at peace, then so should be the water and air. Good point. Well, I don't know what the answer is right off the top of my head. We may have to look at the treaties underlying all this and see what they say about that. But it's most likely that they are just arbitrarily remaining at war because it was to their advantage financially to do this. And it does seem that we should be able to declare a single flag and a single jurisdiction, an overarching national decision to be at peace. So yeah, we'll take that up.
Okay, the next question is, will we have access to the med beds if we are losing our health and cannot continue? How will our republic continue? I need an answer. I have been in this fight for 35 years. Oh, it starts out with the subject. I am sorry. I need to know if we, assembly members, will have access to the med beds.
Yes. Veterans have preference. That's only fair. So I think we all realize that. They gave years of their lives to defending this country, and even if they did things that they didn't know, they thought they were doing one thing and they were being used as mercenaries instead, that's not their fault. They acted in good faith. And so veterans have preference for the med beds, but they do exist. At last report, 8 million of them exist and are distributed, or are in the process of being distributed. The biggest problem related to their deployment is training people to operate them, which is obviously in process right now, is training the people to operate the med beds. But they are real, and they are being distributed to medical centers and some private clinics around the country. One of the interesting parts of the story, that I don't know how much it's gotten out into the mainstream media or not, but there is a healing frequency that can be inducted, so that if you hear this healing frequency, or you're around someone who has sort of caught the vibe, that their body is in healing modality, that it can induce resonance of that frequency from person to person and cause a regenerative effect in people who come into contact with it. So for a lot of different things, like, a common cold or a bit of rheumatism, or, migraine headache, things that are not so absolutely serious as, say, stage 4 cancer, the lesser illnesses, diseases, and problems can be treated simply by listening to this frequency long enough so that your body begins resonating to that frequency. So at a cellular level, a lot of things can be cleared up without a med bed. So it's only the more serious things that really require a med bed. You know, things like cancer, diabetes, uh, broken limbs, uh, missing limbs, paralysis, inoperable tumors of various kinds. You know, these are things that actually require the full spectrum med bed technology. But most of the aches and pains and, having arthritis and things like that can be self-regenerative, um, using just the basic healing frequency that our cells recognize. And then our cells actually cause, well, like spontaneous remission. You've heard of spontaneous remission with cancer. All of a sudden somebody just gets well, boom, there you are. This is what has happened, is that people have been cured because one way or another, they gained contact. Maybe it was through eating the right food, because food has resonance. Maybe it was because they went walking in the rain and the rain had the right resonance. Who knows? But the resonance is what prompts the cells of our body to spontaneously heal the body. And most of the things that bother us initially, that are less serious, can be taken care of that way without even going to a med bed and all the technology that involves. So unless you're really sick, you probably don't even need a med bed. And the frequency healing will be available too. So there's a big push now to bring forward the healing frequency through whole tone music. And that's just a matter of listening to music that is not skewed and in an unnatural musical pattern. The Rockefellers got in there and messed with the musical tuning scale. And when they did that, they created a built-in subliminal, like a sour note, that we're not aware of it consciously, but it grates on our hearing and on our nerves without us being aware of it. So now the pushback is to go to whole tone music and to feed in the healing frequency as a subliminal message within the whole tone music, so that when you're listening to this music, say at a hospital or nursing home, or just at home if you're convalescing, that sort of thing, you're just listening to this pleasant music and it's actually healing you, and it's actually telling your cells to regenerate. Does that make sense? Well, so yes, you will have access. If you are a veteran, you'll have access sooner than if you're not a veteran. If you have a severe problem, you've got serious diabetes, you've got serious fibromyalgia, you've got serious osteoporosis, you've got, real problems, then you need the med bed. But otherwise, if you've just got a little touch of arthritis here and there, you've got, say, type 2 diabetes, and you have, say, you have some prostate problems, things of that nature, they'll be able to cure that pretty much spontaneously just using the healing frequency. I know I did have a question about charging for the declarations, and the question was, does the state assembly have to charge for recording? And the answer is no. It's up to the state to determine what they're going to actually charge for recording fees for people coming on board. And what we had suggested as the Federation was just very simply to have a small fee, enough to cover printer ink and paper and that sort of thing, and then have a have it built in, have it pre-agreed that if someone is struggling and they don't have funds to do this, go ahead and do it for free. It's not going to cost hardly anything to give people a copy of their filing and their original. And, so it's not really a big expense for an organization to bear. And you as a state assembly, you can decide that, okay, well, we're only going to charge $10 to record these on the LRO. Or, you can determine that anyone that's in need, they lost their job, or they're unemployed, they're too elderly, or they're disabled, or they're sick. There's no reason that you have to charge them anything. And certainly in those cases, it would be best not to. I mean, they are in a position of having to reclaim their birthright through no fault of their own. This has been something that has been foisted off on them by their own employees acting in breach of trust. And the only reason that there's any need to actually charge is to recoup things like once in a while having to buy a new computer or a new printer, or to change ink and pay for paper for the copies, things like that. So it's no big deal, and it's up to the state assembly. So what other questions do we have?
I lost my house in a foreclosure and eviction in 2024. I am trying to imagine who will facilitate the change of hands and what kind of process will that be?
The same court that took it from you is the one that's going to give it back to you. It's their mistake, and they have to exonerate their mistake. And the same people that kicked you out are going to be the ones that are going to have to escort you back into your property, and they're going to be the ones that have to pay for the fines, fees, and expenses of all this. Now, unfortunately, they're going to try to use your trust fund money to pay for all of this, so that you're stuck one way or another, no matter what. But realistically, there's enough money in your trust fund so that it's almost nothing to you. I mean, and they get some fines, they get some jail time, they get things on their record too. So there are other forms of restitution on the table for those that are most egregious in doing this kind of thing. Not everybody will be able to get their house back. Not everybody will want their house back after their house has stood vacant for a couple of years and has sustained damage as a result of this, but we are going for it. We are going back to get everybody's house back, everything that has been foreclosed on, everybody who's suffered eviction, everybody who's been accused of phony debts, everybody who has suffered aggravated identity theft, everybody who's suffered from this whole criminal wrap-up. We are definitely looking to shut down the district courts and to force the district courts to go back over their decisions and exonerate every single one of those cases that involved a named individual, meaning a corporation that was named after an American. Because it's aggravated identity theft. And it's armed trespass. There are a lot of crimes involved, and those crimes are very expensive, and they're very it's just shameful that any such system was ever operated in America and that they got away with it for so long.
Okay, for our next question, can you please discuss the specifics of the military's involvement and support?
Well, I think that the military has been hoodwinked as much as anybody else, probably more so. Just the fact that we had the draft during the Vietnam War and it was totally illegal and had been illegal for 200 years and nobody noticed for how many years? Nobody actually held them feet first to the fire over that. Yeah, our military has been abused and used and misled and absolutely nobody I know of in the military, including my husband, were ever told that they were going to be working as mercenaries for a commercial corporation. That never came up in any of the fine print or any of the discussions, or that was just never shared by any of the induction personnel or any of the recruiters. You know,
I know it wasn't shared to me.
no, no, it wasn't. It was not shared to anybody. And so the contracting process lacked full disclosure, and it was illegal to begin with. So our military has been extremely ill used and abused, and the people have been conscripted and press ganged, which both of those activities under the draft had been outlawed for 200 years. And yet we can all remember, if we were around during the Vietnam era, we can all remember the draft. So this administration by these foreign commercial and municipal corporations has been extremely lawless, fast and loose. They have not abided by any standards of commercial contracting. And I'm sure that if our guys had been told that, okay, well, here's your big opportunity to be a mercenary and go fight over, poppy fields in Afghanistan, our guys wouldn't have done it. And if they would have done it, they would have charged a whole hell of a lot more for the service, wouldn't they? Because right down the street, these mercenary operations like BlackRock were going around and paying, $500,000 for the same services that our guys were, skinning along at $50,000 a year. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, our military has been abused and misled.
Lied to, misled, misinformed, brainwashed. That's just my experiences.
Right. So, yeah, the military is just beginning to wake up along with everybody else. Although I do have to say that the military grapevine is a lot better than the civilian grapevine, because the military has their watering holes, they have their veterans clubs, and so it tends to go from Joe to Pete to Jim to George, and pretty soon the whole community is buzzing like a beehive, and that's good. That's good because the word that they've been used as cheap mercenaries is not going down well, and it's pretty well known in the community now on a worldwide basis. So military has its axes to grind, and we certainly don't blame them. And they also realize that the way that they've been misused and abused has also meant harm to the families back home, and that through no fault of their own, they were in dereliction of duty. That their aim was to protect and to serve and to care for and protect the country. And not only did they get tracked off doing mercenary duty, while they were doing mercenary duty, mom and pop back home were not being taken care of. We were suffering invasion. We were suffering all sorts of mischief with our trade markets and everything else. So the military isn't happy, and I don't blame them, and I don't think anybody else blames them. And as a result, you've got a lot of the military guys taking a second look at what really went on here. And I don't know if there's going to be any significant ruffle about anything. Last I've heard, the military has pretty much taken it upon itself to evaluate the situation and to abide by the court orders. And that's what they should do, because the corporations are guilty and self-interested and in conflict of interest. So continuing to take orders from the corporation administration is, this is the same organization that misused and abused you and signed you up as mercenaries without even mentioning that this was a mercenary service and all the rest of it. So from what I'm seeing, the military, by and large, has not only awakened, but has taken off the gloves.
Okay, next question is, how long until the state, local, and federal cops recognize us and get their act in line?
About a week, maybe 2 weeks at the outside. Because you see, there's going to be a big announcement. There'll be a proclamation. The proclamation will, list all the different things. And getting the law enforcement and peacekeeping forces together and getting everybody on the same page with the same understanding will be job one. And, it's going to become very obvious to everybody that being a revenue agent is not their job, that their actual job is to promote public safety and peace. And so that they should be on the roads helping accident victims, making sure that everybody's okay on the roads, promoting health and safety, not going around and keeping a record of how many tickets they wrote. Okay, that's not their job. So there's going to be a change in the direction and the focus of law enforcement and peacekeeping activities in the country. And there'll also be considerably better coverage of law enforcement and peacekeeping activities in the country. For a long time, ever since the federal marshals were defunded by the ever incompetent, evil, and incompetent, evil, and in some points criminal U.S. Congress, ever since the federal marshals were defunded, one entire sector of our law enforcement community was left empty. There was nobody guarding that whole jurisdiction, was just left wide open. And that's why we formed the Continental Marshals in the first place, is that without the federal marshals, the whole country was laid bare to things like human trafficking, drug smuggling, interstate bank fraud, counterfeiting, all this stuff that is really detrimental and damaging to our country was happening in the international land jurisdiction. So precisely the jurisdiction that was defunded by Congress is the jurisdiction that was being made use of by the criminals. And that jurisdiction is now going to be completely covered. And that will be a big benefit. That will be a big change in the law enforcement community, because they'll be getting back the equivalent of federal marshals on the land jurisdiction to help with the U.S. marshals who have always been sea jurisdiction. Okay. There'll be better coordination between the militias, the troopers, and assuming that the Canadians continue with their application to be part of the United States, the RCMP will also be integrated, and all the rest of the services will be working together in a much more networked and organized fashion, which will be good. But they will also have a different slant on things, because they will all understand that they're here not to protect the corporations, but to protect the people. Their primary job is to protect the people and the people's property. And if they don't do anything else, that's just fine. Any protection afforded to the corporations and to public property is a distinctly secondary issue. So there's going to be a change in focus as a result. And everybody who works for the government, whether you're a National Guardsman or you're a city official or you're a librarian working for the public library system, you're all going to know what your job is, and it's going to be very simple. You are going to be there to help protect and provide services to the public, to the people. So you protect the people and you protect their assets. You help them any way you can. And that's your job. You're not there as a revenue agent. You're not there to play school marm. You're not there to dispense public justice on the side of the road. I don't know where some of these officers have gotten their training or what kind of impression or instruction they've received, but it is not in line with what our government condones. So there's going to be a change in attitude and a change in emphasis as far as the work that is done. And I do believe that by the time we're done with this, the people that are in those positions will be much better educated. Because right now, there are actually programs in this country that screen police officers in ways that are totally inappropriate. They are looking for people that are of a very moderate IQ. They have limits on the IQ of police officers. They can't be above a certain IQ. They can't have a certain level of education. They can't have anything above a bachelor's degree. It's just crazy stuff that's going on. They have classes at state trooper academies about how to lie, how to falsify your witness statements. All that crap is going out the door, folks. Our government is not going to tolerate that kind of disservice and incompetence and bad faith. The people are going to be of paramount importance, and serving the people and protecting the people and their property is job one, and it's job two, and it's job three. So that's the instruction going out to the law enforcement and peacekeeping communities from top to bottom. From the tip top of the military to the county sheriff's deputies, and back up.
Okay, now for the next question. When it comes to the process, will it be a smooth transition or a massive punch to us? I know we can barter, which some of us are already doing, but for those who have no barter to give, what can we do to help our neighbors who can't?
Well, I actually think that we're going to be fine. We have a good bank system. We've got the means to deploy that bank system. The individuals who are already in the bank system have the ability to draw down funds to help their communities and their extended families. It will very rapidly spool up. Everything is automated. Everything's online. Actually, you only have to come up with 3 pieces of paper to get your your political status, your identity card, and your bank cards. So I think that very, very rapidly, once people realize what's been done and what they need to do, is they're going to be signing up by the millions, and any of the potential problems that could have happened simply won't happen, because there will be enough money floated into the economy to prevent that from happening. Also, because we have some excellent people in our PKTF program, and we have some excellent allies in terms of the food industry issues, so that we will be able to deploy direct sources of food and water to people. That's one of the big things that has been a concern throughout, is food, water, and fuel. But there's another aspect of this I think people need to understand, is that with the American government back in the driver's seat, we have the opportunity now to forestall so many of the harmful things that would otherwise happen, simply by telling our employees, no, don't do that, and going on the record as having said that. Because it's just like any other situation that you can imagine. The employees are left in charge of the store, and they decide that they're going to have a blowout Black Friday sale, and they're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and it does not conform with the desires, needs, or values of the store owners. Oh, well, okay. Then enter the store owner who tells them, no, we're not going to have a Black Friday sale like that. We're going to do this instead. Okay, so now that we're back in the saddle, so to speak, we can do that with success and say, no, we don't want to do this in this way, or we don't want to do it at all. And so you're going to see some significant changes coming about because the employees are no longer in charge. The employers are back. And with the employers being back, it's going to reflect the values and the just the common sense, I guess you could say, and the lack of commercial self-interest that the lawyers have, not the lawyers, the owners have, as opposed to the foreign employees that are trying to bring home the bacon for foreign interests.
Okay, for our next magical question. Governor Abbott is recalling the National Guard back to Texas. Does this mean the National Guard is back to the lawful land jurisdiction instead of the federal jurisdiction under Trump?
Well, it means that he's calling it back to Texas to operate within the borders of Texas, which is strictly speaking what should be done with all of the National Guard units, because what nation are they talking about? If you're talking about a National Guard for Texas, then that National Guard should be operating within the borders of Texas, unless they have a mutual assistance pact with another state. This is something I discussed with the states early on, is that when you have a National Guard or a national militia, and in the case of the assemblies, you've got the state means the nation and the nation means the state. So when you have a National Guard or a national militia, that implies that they're going to stay within their nation state and within its borders. And the only way that they are supposed to go outside their borders is if they have a mutual assistance pact with, say, a neighboring state. And you can see how this works, where, okay, so the Texas National Militia is in Texas, and they have an agreement with the Oklahoma Assembly that if some sort of natural disaster or something of that ilk happens on the border between Texas and Oklahoma, that the national militias of both states are going to be deployed. Okay, so you can make these agreements, they're called egress treaties, in advance and have those set up with an agreement between the state assemblies that, yeah, given this and this and this and this circumstance, and yeah, then we welcome the national militia from Texas to come across our border and come help. Okay, so you set those things up in advance. You can even do it on a regional basis. That, you know, anywhere within the region suffering a natural disaster, you know, tornadoes, fires, floods, volcanic eruptions, you know, whatever, that you know, our regional militias will work together to answer the needs of a particular state within the region. So you can have those agreements, but they're agreements. Otherwise, just in the natural functioning of things, the national militias, or what they're calling the National Guards, should be operating only within the borders of their state. And that's one of the things that really got me, you know, I look back, there were so many things, but one of the things that really got my attention and that got me mad and that got Jim mad was that they were using the National Guard troops as cheap replacements for the military. It was cheaper to deploy National Guards who were supposed to be weekend warriors and guys standing sort of as reserves and, you know, to take care of things that happened in their state of the Union, right? And they were deploying them to places like Iraq and Afghanistan because it was cheaper and they had fewer rules and regulations that they had to honor and uphold. And, you know, that was just offensive as hell. And it was never supposed to be that way. But you see, once again, they were playing semantic games about which nation, right? We were thinking the nation state, the State of the Union, right? And they were thinking their federal or territorial administrative state, right? So their nation was not our nation, and they just weren't filling us in on that little detail. Anyway, Governor Abbott and all the other governors we passed the word to them that they're only supposed to be deploying their National Guards within the state. And so there've been a lot of governors getting information they never had before. But yeah, that is the fact that if you have a national militia, whether you call it a National Guard, you call it a national militia, you call it a, national troopers, or, anything that has a reference that is obviously meant to be the nation state. In our case, the State of the Union is the nation state. So within that reference, they're only supposed to be operating inside their state borders unless they have a prior existing compact with a sister state, or in some cases, even with a foreign government to assist, given various different conditions and situations. It is entirely possible under our system of government for the state assembly of Texas, say the Texas Assembly, to make a contract with the government of Mexico, for example, a mutual assistance pact to fight crime, or to provide for clean water initiatives on the Rio Grande, or to do cleanup and oil remediation in the Gulf of Mexico together. And so depending on how you're structuring your international business through your international business assembly and the kinds of agreements and contracts that you set up, you can see your National Guard or your national militia operating outside or on the border of your state. But the way that things were set up initially and were always intended to be is that your national militia people stay within the borders of your state.
Okay. Our next question is, are USPS money orders going to be recognized as lawful money when our bank opens? In other words, what's the best thing for me to do with my money orders I have on hand?
I would take them in and bring them to the post office. And if the post office has any problem with them, then take them to Global. I mean, one way or another, those will get paid. Because it would fall under our post office.
Okay. What is the criteria for ASNs to get access to med beds? When will the military start tearing down the 5G towers that are harming all of us every day?
My understanding is that the 5G towers don't have to harm anybody, that they can be weaponized. And the big question is, how do we denature them so they can't be weaponized? If they're just being used to, do harmless things, that's fine. But we don't want weaponry in our neighborhoods. So that's a technological question that I'm not prepared to answer right now, but we will be looking into all of it, of course. And, there are just a plethora of different things to address. The chemtrails have to stop. The soil has to be remediated. The nano pollution has to be addressed. And as far as the med beds are concerned, what I've seen is kind of a broad spectrum deployment approach where all the VA centers have med beds, all the major public hospitals and clinics, we have native hospitals here in Alaska, they have them. We have regional hospitals, they have them. So all the major hospitals and a smattering of private clinics. Private clinics, most likely you're going to find the med bed distribution going to private clinics that work with amputees. So that's the connect there. For example, we have a hospital that is just nothing but caring for amputees and people that have lost limbs from things like diabetes and accidents. And so that would be, there would be a med bed at hospitals that are dealing with recuperation of people who have lost limbs, because there would be the regenerative features. And also another place to look for them would be the long-term nursing care, where you have people that are elderly and they would have the med beds there for regenerative therapy. The other thing that comes up quite often is you have private clinics that are specializing in some particular problem, like fibromyalgia. Okay. If it's a condition or disease that can only be treated using the med bed and is not something that can be helped with conventional medicine or with frequency-based medicine that's less intense, you might find these specialized private clinics having med beds. Of course, as the technology becomes more popular and becomes more refined, then you'll start seeing other things happening where, for example, you could have mobile units. For example, say that you're caring for an elderly family member at home and they need a simple regenerative therapy. Say that they need to rebuild their knee joint, okay? And so they need to have access to a med bed for 6 weeks, once, one treatment, 1 day a week. Well, then they have smaller mobile units that fit in the back of a van, and they can go right to the house of the person instead of having to go through the hospital and all of that. So there are a lot of different modalities that are being worked on for the med beds. And, with 8 million of them already produced, that's slightly more than 3 million full sets for general care. That's quite a lot if you think about it. We have a population of 320 million, and they have already produced and deployed 8 million med beds. And they'll keep on producing as many as are needed, and they'll keep on training new people to use these technologies. I would guess, at the rate they're going, probably 10 years, a lot of the conventional hospitals will have shut down and been converted into other uses. And I'm okay with that. I'm happy with that. I know there are a lot of, there are some parties that won't be happy about the cure rate. There'll be screaming and gnashing of teeth in the AMA, and no doubt there will be lots of drug company executives, people like Pfizer and Moderna and so forth and so on. They won't be happy, but find another need. Find something else that you can do that's useful and that people need.
Okay, next question is, when will we get access to all the patents and technology that was stolen from us?
Well, somebody has to take over the US Patent Office and open it up. And that's more of a military function at this point, because let's face it, the military has had control of the patent office for a long time and has not always done the best job of making use of the patent office. So I think that's that's kind of a specialized thing. You have specialized attorneys, you have specialized clerks, you have specialized patent officers and offices. And so that's kind of a niche that we need to dig into and route out and reform all in of itself. I don't think that there's any way that we can just do a broad brush, release all of the hidden technologies. Part of the problem is that I guess we could say all beneficial technologies. There are a lot of things that have gone screw loose in the patent office over the years, and one of them is that they've allowed outright criminal patents. I mean, outrageous things. They've allowed patents on, how to assassinate someone. They've allowed patents on things like a murder system. Crazy stuff. And yet they've allowed patents on criminal processes and criminal inventions. So I think first and foremost, we're going to have to go through there and remove all of those criminal patents. And then we're going to have to release things that have been, we're going to have to examine things that have been held up under national security concerns and evaluate those. Is this really a form of protectionism of cronies in a given industry that don't want the competition from a new technology, so the new technology is being suppressed? Or is there a genuine reason why this is a criminal technology or a technology that represents a public danger? And unfortunately, we're going to have to go through and look at each and every one of these and evaluate them in those terms so that we do our primary job, which is to protect the people and their property, and at the same time show proper respect for inventors and people who have intellectual property rights. It's one of those kind of specialized things where I imagine that there will be inventors and there will be industries, entire industries that will be knocking on the door and want to get specific patents released so that they can pursue products and processes that have been suppressed. I actually think that will probably be the driving force beyond the patent reform, is just that people who have had these technologies that they haven't been able to commercially develop will naturally come forward and say, hey, how is this a national security interest? And if it is a national security interest, how do we nonetheless exercise our intellectual property right? Oh, Shannon.
I'm here. I was reading through this question, trying to understand it. Two ASNs, how would they document their union since no license is needed? And do they get it recorded? Where and published where? If you have one ASN and another not ASN, the ASN passed on, does the GFG account go to the state or to the non-ASN? The ASN failed to do a will regarding the GFG account.
Good question. I don't know the answer. I have to get back to you on that one. Every state has different rules about spousal interests. So I'm not sure that the state law would take precedent or the bank law would take precedent. Under the bank law, the surviving spouse, assuming that they were not divorced, the surviving spouse would get the assets in the Global Family Bank account of the deceased spouse, just as a matter of course. It's always best to have a testament. And part of the reason that we're in the problems that we're in is that people don't like to face up to the fact that, yeah, they could die someday and they should have a will and testament so that important things are settled when they die. Otherwise, you just leave everything in the hands of some unknown judge that is hired by the state as a foreign jurist to come in and look at the situation and decide whether they think your wife should get it or your ex-brother-in-law should get it or whatever. So I always wonder why leave it to chance? Why not just sit down for 15 minutes and say, okay, this is what I want to have happen after I kick off here. So I would advise everybody to get busy and spend that little time and actually write out a will and record it. And then you won't have that problem. We have never had a tradition about licensing marriage until after the Civil War. And a license is a right to do something that would otherwise be criminal. And in no respect is it a criminal act to marry. Living people have every right to marry. It's only when you're being denigrated as a person that the state gets any leeway or leverage to say one word about who marries who or when or why or how. And so the thing for Americans has always been that marriages were affirmed by churches. You know, you had the officiating church would confirm the marriage, right? And that's really all that the government needed to know. That's still really all the government needs to know. But they came up with this idea of the civil marriage. And in that case, the government is the presiding agent and actually is the one verifying that the marriage contract, and they interpret it as a contract, not a vow. Okay, so one is an ecclesiastical law where you have a covenant and a vow, right? And then they have the civil marriage, which regards it as a business partnership forming. Yes, you're a little JV, a little joint venture, and the officiant state of whatever takes a assumed third-party position with regard to the joint venture that they're licensing, okay? Which is something nobody ever thinks about and should. But anyway, it's outrageous that there are such things as marriage licenses in the modern day. And we should all be outraged and we should all demand that the state of states cease and desist from such things on our soil. But yeah, if the whole thing with the ASNs is like everybody else, if you have a testament prior to death, that makes everything easy. If you neglect that and you die unexpectedly and don't have a chance to make a will, then the government, our government, would naturally assume a superior position over any living flesh with regard to a marriage. The state would still try to come in, the state of state would still try to come in and say that it was a joint venture, but that again is aggravated identity theft and unlawful conversion. So if I were in a situation where I had an intestate estate to deal with, and I was making claim against that intestate estate based on a licensed marriage, I would have to deal with the state of state's statutory requirements because the marriage itself would have been defined as a joint venture. That's not necessarily where anybody wants to be, but that is nonetheless how it was set up, and that's on you because you set it up that way. Now, if you get remarried to another ASN, it's a pretty simple thing for GFG to honor a assumption of the surviving spouse's interest in the mutual estate is what it's called. And I'm sure that is the standing customary and traditional interpretation of survivor rights, is that the survivor gets the first call on an estate of a spouse. And then you start looking at the adult children and the minor children of an estate as survivorships. Hope that answered the question. but
All right, we're about 5 minutes out from hitting the 2 hour mark. One last question here before we call it a night. There seems to be many rumors going around about a GFG medical card. What is that and when is it coming out?
you'll be able to actually order your own medical card. You know, there'll be a screen, a dashboard, and there'll be these different cards, and you'll be able to order your medical card. The medical card will basically replace a Medicaid, Medicare, and all of that stuff. And it will save billions of dollars and make it very easy for you to get care at a public hospital or a private clinic or wherever and whatever you need to go and go do. And you won't have the nightmare of referrals where you have to go to a general practitioner and get a referral to every specialist, and you know, all that stuff you can just chuck out the window because it's just more make work and it's more record keeping, and it's senseless. So you're going to have responsibility for coming up with your own treatment protocols and making your own treatment decisions. And you'll have your own medical account where you can charge your expenses for these treatments. And really, the only oversight to that is, does the treatment plan make sense? So, you know, obviously, if you've got a verified enlarged prostate problem and you're getting treatments for, you know, medical neck massage, there might be some question of, okay, what are we treating here? What really is the problem? Are there two problems here and one is undiagnosed? So, you know, there'll be some rational, reasonable oversight on the medical program, but for the most part, you'll be able to get those goods and services that you need, that you decide that in consulting your healthcare professionals, what you really want to do with your healthcare. And there won't be any insurance. There won't be the kind of private insurance that you've had before either. You know, Medicaid and Medicare are public insurances. Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and all that sort of stuff, private insurances. You'll just have your card and you'll be able to buy whatever you need wherever you need it.
All right, Anna, that puts us at 1 minute to the 2 hour marker. You ready to call it, or do you want to go a little over with one more question?
One more question.
How will this affect? I'll make it a quick one. How will this affect the passport system? And how will that affect our passports?
Well, your US passports will continue to work until you get a new one. We'll have American passports, obviously. They'll be a different color. They'll be operating in a different jurisdiction under different presumptions of law. That's okay. We have to sit down with the Universal Postal Union and work out the details and all of that. My understanding is that our standardized credential cards, our state credential cards, and a birth certificate and some sort of proof that we're receiving mail at the ID address is sufficient. But we will need to work with the U.S. Secretary of State and with the Universal Postal Union to get those details ironed out and to get our postal unit set up so that we can actually issue our own international passports. I don't think that's going to be a whole big deal. I think that'll go pretty fast.
Okie dokie. There you have it, folks. That's all we got time for tonight. Try it. We'll do this again next week and keep doing it till Terry comes back.
Right. And if you possibly can spare me some shekels, we're in need. And I would suggest that you use the, just make donations to the Federation through the TASA website and through Paul Stramer. With Paul, make sure that you designate who and what you're donating to, and he will make sure that whichever person's programs and whatnot, that it gets properly sent to the intended recipient. Otherwise, we can take cash in the mail at Post Office Box 520994 in Big Lake, Alaska, 99652. And we can take smaller denomination checks as long as you don't fill in the pay to blank. Just fill in the amount and sign it as your donation. I have no account in the present bank system, and it is so close to having our own bank system up that I don't want to go through the hassle of trying to secure a bank account under the current circumstance. So that's how that all lines out. Expect some big moves in the next couple of weeks. Kind of a hang on to your hat, and we go for the gusto from here on in. Take care, everybody. God bless.
See you all next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.